Good morning, everyone. Getting everybody in here. So excited. Look at all these amazing people. I see some familiar faces, and we all know the reason why. It's because the great Jen Davis is here today. So super excited for the conversation that we're going to have. Before we jump into that, two things real quick. Next week, we have Wellness Wednesday. We will be right here, and we're going to be talking about prepping for preseason because the month of August is a great time for us to prep for the last season of the year, which is September through December. And so make sure that you're back here next week with us at 9 Central, where I'll be walking you through step by step what you can do to finish the year strong in whatever category of strength or strong you want to finish in. And in the month of August, let's see if I can get this to go over. Well, it doesn't want to do it. In the month of August, we also have the following topics. So the 7th, we're going to be working through your own personal BS. 14th, habits of happiness. 21st, turning your critic to an inner coach. And the 28th, we will have a special guest. So we've got all kinds of goodness coming your way for Wellness Wednesday. So make sure that you block that off and that you're here with us every single week. Now, I have this very special guest who many of you know is one of my all-time favorite people. And at this point, I don't even know how many times I've interviewed Jen Davis. In fact, that's how I first met her. And we tricked all of you because we lured you here under the guise of would you rather be special or happy? But what Jen and I are really going to talk about is just the Chiefs training camp. And so we're going to talk all things Chiefs for the next 30 minutes, right, Jen?
We are. I'm going to go change into my Mahomes jersey and I'll be back.
Well, I saw Carrie Worst jump in, so I know Carrie's going to be okay with that as well. So we've got some Chiefs fans with us. But in all seriousness, Jen, this is a really amazing topic. It's obviously something that people want to hear about. And I'm curious, or I'm wondering, could you kick us off by just sharing with everybody how we ended up here on this topic?
So Jordan, you and I are really good friends, right? Which means really good friends text back and forth. And you've had some life events and I've had some life events. And so we check in on our people, right? And so I sent you a text, which I think I'm just going to read to kick us off. And it was basically, we were doing the how are yous, all of those things. But I said to you, I was like, I listened to a podcast about rest last week. It was really good. My takeaway was, is it more important to be special or to be happy? For years, I thought being special would make me happy, and it just made me really freaking tired. So happy I typed freaking since, I repeat out loud.
That's not edited. That's what she actually typed.
It is what I actually typed, which is surprising with you. And I think that's what kicked it off, right? You and I were texting back and forth about what life was like on the other side of slow down. And that was from a podcast that I heard.
Yeah. And when you said that, it immediately formed the question, right? Of would you rather be special or would you rather be happy? And I'm curious, what does that question mean to you, Jen?
I think when you look at special, right? I think there are going to be some of the people on here that are like, Jen, you are special. Everyone's special. I'm like, yes, I understand that. I think for me, though, special was accolades. Special was getting to be in certain rooms. Special was having a seat at the table. Special was, whether it be a top buyer agent, whether it be getting our team to 40% profitability, whether it being, the role I got to have at MAPS, even when I first got to be a MAPS coach, right? Those types of things, that's what I was looking at of like special was maybe an external influence, right? Like I was looking for something to fill a bucket, right? I was looking for maybe relevance, right? Like I think everyone wants to be relevant. And then when you look at happy, right? So if you listen to this podcast, it was Chris Lagarde, right? Who's a friend of mine. He had sent me the podcast, and that wasn't his takeaway, right? It's a blip in the podcast. That question is just a blip. And it hit me because I looked up and I said, happy to me is the internal game, right? Happy is my perception of self. And my perception of self is, am I living my priorities out loud? Right? Am I actually putting my priorities on the calendar? Am I actually showing up for my priorities? And so happy for me was, how do I get in alignment with myself? So it's more the internal influence.
And the thing about priorities, Jen, to you, is there a difference between priorities and values?
I think priorities to me are the values that you actually live, right? I think we all have values. I think if I asked any person on this screen, are your kids important to you? Do you want to be a good parent? Do you want to be a good partner? Do you want to be honest and ethical, right? I think values, we all have values. I think priorities for me are where values show up, right? I think so for me, a priority is, I'm actually living this way, right? What I say is important to me is actually how I'm living my life. So, yes, I think priorities for me are values. That's the short answer. But we all know that I'm a high I, right? So I have to say 1,000 words when I could say it in 100, probably. So I think that's just it. Priority has a deeper meaning for me than a value, because I think we all have values. I think oftentimes, though, we just kind of bury it in an effort to win, at something.
Yeah, the way that I describe it based on what you just shared is that priorities are values that ate their Wheaties.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Priorities are values that ate their Wheaties. And there was something, Jen, that you shared. It was a quote, and we were in where were we? It was the Spring Mastermind, and I don't even remember what city. San Antonio. We were in San Antonio, right? And there was a quote that you shared that kind of, I remember I was sitting in the front row at the general session and you said it and you could feel it work its way through the crowd. Do you
Mhm.
remember what the quote was?
Yeah, it's from that book, Chase the Lion by Mark Batterson. And it says it's really hard to be famous in your own home if you're never there.
It's really hard to be famous in your own home when you're never there. And see, but here's the thing is that you were physically present, right? When you were home.
Yeah, it's interesting, when I decided to step back from the role at MAPS, right? And I'm still a MAPS coach, so it's all, all of those things are good. When I decided to take a step back, it wasn't because my kids were saying, I miss you, or you're not here, or you missed a track meet, or you missed a basketball game, or you missed dinner. I just was going through the motions, right? So I was at all of these things, physically present. I was at all of these things. And when I said to specifically Caitlin, she's 17, she'll be a senior next year. When I said to her that I was stepping back, she was like, why? And I was like, I want to spend more time with you. And she was like, you're always here. But so there was no like guilt from my kids of like, hey, you're not here. I just didn't, I wasn't being the parent that I wanted to be. The other thing we talked about at Spring Masterminds was you build habits now for the person you want to be in 10 years or the person you want to be in 20 years. I think Jay says in your someday, right? Your someday life, right? Like someday. And I think for me, it was looking up and saying, I don't, I'm not going to have a bad relationship with my kids in 10 years or 20 years. We have a great relationship. I'm a great mom. My kids love me, but I don't want to look up in 10 years and not remember this season of life. I don't want to be making spaghetti, right? Last night I made spaghetti meatballs. So I don't want to be making spaghetti and meatballs and but I'm like, I'm worried about the text messages I need to send or the emails that I haven't responded to or the 16 Zoom meetings I have the next day, right? And I think that it wasn't that I wasn't home, it was simply I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying my kids in the season of life that they're in.
Yeah, and I'll never forget about a year and a half ago, you probably remember this when a group of us went up and spent 3 days in the mountains with Chad Wright's team, the Project 3 of 7.
Mhm.
And if you don't know Chad Wright, he's a former Navy SEAL commander. And for some reason, we thought it was a good idea to go spend 3 days in the mountains with this dude. And one of our mutual friends, who is also a kind of a great colleague and friend to me, is Scott Klaus. And I'll never forget sitting around the fire one night. And one of the things that Scott said that just rang like a bell was, he said, I realized today that I am physically present with my kids, but I'm not being energetically present. And I thought, like still when I talk
It's
about that,
powerful.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, ooh. And part of me is like, damn it, I don't know if I like that. But I think that's what you mean, right? Like you were physically present, but not energetic, not as energetically present as you wanted to be.
That's right. I mean, I was having conversations, I was talking to them, but it was like, that what Scott said is the best way to say it, right? It was just, I was simply existing, right? I was simply, what I was, we talk about it in coaching, right? You can either snorkel or you can scuba dive, right? And I think I was just kind of snorkeling, right? I wasn't going deep enough. Scott is, he and I ran a marathon together, Jordan. We ran the Disney marathon together and we ran every step of the way. And one of his buddies was tracking us and he texted him and was like, Scott, I hope that Jen Davis was pleasant because you were with her the whole way. And we laughed about it. We also beat Zuber, if anyone was wondering about our times.
Oh, thank God for that. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Jen has, obviously she stepped out of her vice president position with Maps, and she's taking the summer off, right?
Yeah.
Yet this was something like you started thinking about this originally in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then, fast forward, it was in November of 2023 that you made the decision that this was what you were going to do, right? You're going to take the summer off, step away from that position. And so I'm curious, Jen, like, was that like a moment in time that you made that decision, or was that something that you like a season that you thought about it? Can you kind of unpack that for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really hard October. I completed Bold, which is a good hard, right? Bold um is a course that kind of gets you. I had helped rewrite it and I think that's going through another rewrite now. And so I finished Bold. We had fall masterminds. I testified in the federal court case, and I helped KWU record somewhere around 70 hours of content. And it just passed, right? October just flew by. And I got to November and I was like a couple days out from Thanksgiving, and I was going to take the week off, and I got really sick. Fever, all of it. And I was so tired. And in that week that I was going to have off, right, I had a lot of time to think. I had the white space that we all talk about. I had a lot of time to think. And there's an acronym that the pastor in my church always talks about, and it's HALT, right? You don't make a decision if you're hurt, angry, lonely, tired. With Caitlin, her H is hungry. She can't make a decision if she's hungry, right? So I waited, right? So in that space and time, I was not feeling well. I was tired. I had this time off and I wasn't energetically present with my kids. And it's scary to think about walking away from the amazing opportunity that I had, right? I had the opportunity to be in rooms with people that were my, heroes of business, right? My heroes in real estate. And what I figured out over that week is the thing that was holding me back from saying anything was my ego.
Mhm.
And that idea of no longer being relevant or no longer being in the room or no longer, getting to spend time with those individuals. And and once I was able to separate the two within that time, right? Once I was able to kind of shut up the ego side of it, it was a pretty clear decision, right? It was doesn't mean the decision was pretty easy. The actual conversations that followed and feeling like you were disappointing people or walking away or quitting, like that part was hard. The decision part was pretty straightforward. The communication of that decision was challenging.
Yeah. I mean, and there is a quote that you and I both love, which is when your values are clear, decisions are easy. But that doesn't always mean that sticking with that decision over a period of time is easy, right? And one thing, everybody here, that is just a practice of mine, something that I've done for a long time, is I like to know the specific definitions of words. And if you listen to Jen, like through this, the word realize is what showed up. Like I realized, right? And one of my realize is actually one of my favorite words. And I went and looked it up. I pull this definition up often in my coaching conversations. And realize is to become fully aware of something as a fact, to become fully aware of something as a fact. And so, Jen, like what I'm wondering, right, if we go back to that period of time, what was it that you realized that was a fact for you?
I think what I realized that was a fact was that while I was saying out loud, right? Like if anyone asked me what my top priority was, I would have said my family, right? My family and my key relationships. And what I realized the fact for me was it wasn't showing up that way, right? You and I have talked about it. Like Caitlin got to come to family reunion. She got to see the show, right? She got to see the fun side of all of the cool stuff I got to do. You know, she got to meet Mel Robbins, she got to meet Jay, right? She got to meet all these cool people. And so what happened though then was the fact for me was my kids aren't actually seeing me the way that I want them to see me, right? Their memory of me is going to be that I was always tired, right? Because I would get up in the morning and I would work out before they got up, right? So I would run or I would lift or I would do these things. And then I would sit on Zoom all day or I would, travel and then come back and I was tired. And I think that was what woke me up is I was like, I want their memories of me to be that I play, right? That I swim with them, that I play catch with them, that I whatever it is, right? Like I can't really run with Caitlin because she's much faster than I am, but I can ride a bike next to her while she runs and pace her, right? Those were the things, the facts that I realized were I'm here, but these aren't the memories I want them to have of me.
Right. And one of the things is that we see what gets put on social media, right? That you're finishing marathons, you're at these amazing events, meeting amazing people. And I think that one thing that I want everybody to hear in this space is that the people who are watching you on social media, they see the events. Your family and your friends, those that are with you, they see the process. And so that's two very different things, right? To see an event versus to see a process. And one of the coaching call or questions that I continuously come back to, I brought it up yesterday, is are you approaching your life and business in the same fashion you would want your children to approach theirs? And if the answer to that is no, right? Awesome. That's great. And yet, then that allows us, one, a standard to strive for because we want to be an example, not a warning to our children. And then number two, as anybody who's ever coached people knows, we're always looking for the gap because we coach to the gap, right? And so that establishes a gap. And that's what Jen is really saying is that the process that her children were seeing isn't the one that she would have wanted for them if they were in her position. Is that accurate?
It is. And I think you said something really important. Like you talked about your friends seeing certain things. Here's the thing. I was protective of my relationship with my kids. I think what happens though is when we get busy, right? And we're so busy and we're chasing the thing and we're chasing the accolade and we're chasing the success and we're chasing those things. What we tend to do is we actually tend to isolate. We tend to isolate so that we can get one more rep in, one more call in, one more sale, one more whatever, one more coaching call, whatever it is, whatever the one more is. We're intended for community. And what I was doing is whatever I had left over, I was giving to my kids, but I actually was failing the other key relationships in my life, right? Mm-hmm. that was the circle, right? The key relationships of mine that was starting to fracture. And that, I think, is the thing, right? When you say, Jordan, like your friends and your family, they see the process, it may not be all of them see the process, right? Some of my friends, that's been the summer of what I've done, right? I'm reconnecting with people that I didn't have time to have lunch with, right? Like, I think that's as important as anything else, is understanding when we get busy, when we get overwhelmed, we tend to isolate. And really, as humans, we're meant for community. We're meant to connect with other individuals.
And that's right. And look, if you are one of those that want the science on this, do yourself a favor and go look up, just Google the Harvard Love Study, because to my knowledge, it's the longest active study on human behavior. And they looked at, this thing started in like the 20s, the 1920s. We're in the 20s now, 1920s. And yet they looked at everything that creates kind of success or happiness, right? Longevity, vitality. And they looked at it, looks, intelligence, athleticism, where people were born, all these different things. And what they have unequivocally landed on is that the number one contributing factor to a healthy, long, vital life is the strength of your personal relationships. That we are a tribal species and that relationships matter. And that, I think, is kind of the essence of what you're saying there, right? Is that you were, and the things that we are most familiar with are the things that we are most likely to take for granted, right?
Yes, that's just it. And you look at those relationships, Jordan, and you look at a relationship with your children, and that's a relationship of you kind of filling their buckets, right? And so when you isolate from others, when you isolate from the relationships of other people that can pour into you, right? I'm lucky enough that I still was talking to you. I was still talking to Craig, right? I had Dan and Monica, and I have these people that love me despite a lot of flaws, right? That everybody was still checking. But what happens is when you disconnect from some of the key relationships, and you're only focused on the relationships where you're the one that's the person that's in charge or making decisions or in charge of well-being, then what happens is there's just this feeling of loss. And I think that's the happiness for me. Like, if we circle back to that top question, happiness for me is, I need those feelings from people that I love and care about, right? I need connection with them. I need time with them, right? And there's no shortcut to time.
Right. Right. I had this conversation yesterday with a highly, highly successful individual that most people here would know who this person is. And I shared with them, I said, look, you're trying to play the finite game. And the challenge that you have is that regardless of what you believe, we all came from the same place. And I think you would agree with me that we were born of the infinite, right?
Mhm.
We are made of the infinite.
Mhm.
And so if you are made of the infinite, the finite will never fulfill you. It's like fake fruit, right? It may look like a real apple, but the second you bite into it, you're going to know that it's not real.
Mhm.
And what I shared with this individual is that things of the infinite had three qualities in my experience. The first one is, and this is the one that really hits true for what Jen said. They can't be bought; they have to be earned. And so think about like the love and respect that you have from your children, the love and respect that you have from your friends. You can't buy that stuff. You have to earn it in the way that you show up, the way that you treat them, the attention and focus and time that they get from you. The second thing that is of the infinite um, is that it grows when you give it. It gets stronger when you give it. And I think I share this often with people, Jen, especially in the coaching world, is you've got to be fire, not water. And if I have a whole cup of water, like I have my whole cup and it's just a Dixie cup, and Jen has a cup and her cup is empty, and I say, oh, well, here, Jen, take half of mine. Well, hers rises, but the problem is that mine falls. Whereas if I have a lit candle and Jen's is not lit and I light her candle, my candle does not diminish. by lighting hers. And so the things of the infinite, they grow when you give them. And I think that the infinite life is when all of your success and the success that you're chasing is actually a byproduct of four pursuits. Write this down, everybody, because I've not found this to be disproven. I think that it's learning as much as you can so that you can grow as much as you can, so that you can love as much as you can, so that you can give as much as you can. And all of those things, right? If I learn and then I give of that learning, I teach of that learning, it gets stronger in me.
Mm.
It's fire, right? If one of the greatest compensations of life is that you can't truly give to another person without giving to yourself. If you think of somebody, like, everybody do this right now, just think of somebody you really love. And imagine that, like, your heart had a Wi-Fi signal, and that you were going to use the Wi-Fi signal of your heart to touch theirs, no matter where they are, right? If you just sat for a second in that space, what happens is when you're giving that love, it grows in you. Things of the infinite, they grow when you give them. And so the path of fulfillment, in my opinion, um, is best found when you're in the pursuit of those four things. And if you just made that into a cycle, right?
Mhm.
If you just drew it into a diagram, in the middle of it, put the word legacy. And we both have a good friend who's also a client of mine, Scott Maloof. Scott Maloof has a heart of gold, and he was raised by a single mom. And one of the things that he shared with me was legacy is not what you leave for people, it's what you leave in them.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm experiencing that now with the loss of my mom. Right. And so I think that so much of what you're talking about here is a shift from being special and finite pursuits to being happy with infinite pursuits and focusing on the things that can't be bought, but can only be earned. Right.
Mhm.
I love that. So, Jen, last question. I'm a mom, I'm a dad, I'm sitting in the audience, right? Everything that you've said, I've been shaking my head like, yep, yep, that I get that totally. What advice would you give to those people?
I think, it's I'm in a situation where it was somewhat easier, maybe financially easier, to realign my life structure to match my priorities, right? I was able to hit a timeout for the summer, right? I'm not done, right? I'm going to do something next, right? I'm going to come back to work. But I think for someone that's like, I can't take a summer off, I can't take a season off, my advice to you would be to take a day off, right? Start with a day, start with one, and make a plan for being able to take longer off, right? And so what I mean by that is being off, right? The idea of rest. So the podcast that Jordan shared is a faith-based podcast, right? It's based around the idea of Sabbath. And so whether you are a believer or not a believer, there's a reason for a Sabbath. There's a reason for a rest. And so my advice would be find one day a week that you can simply rest. And rest doesn't mean scrolling social media. Rest doesn't mean binge watching Netflix. It's whatever rest gives to you, right? Like whether that's a run or a walk or yoga or reading a book or simply just connecting with people that you love over, a glass of wine, right? Whatever that might be for you. My advice to you would be to start with a day and then plan for your week and then plan for 2 weeks, because you all are here because I got to take the summer off. I've been talking about this for 4 years. So understand that, Laura Hyatt and I were talking about ahead of this call, and we were like, she was like, why didn't I do this thing sooner? And I said to her, I was like, lucky you did it now, though. Lucky you didn't wait one more year. So it doesn't matter where you're at, just start with something, right? And in that rest. And so whether that's a day or a week or whatever that looks like, and then make your plan for what do you want it to look like. I will tell you that I'll never again work a summer. I'll never again work from Memorial Day to Labor Day. it has single-handedly been the best thing that I've ever done for my kids and for myself and for my friends. So that doesn't have to be you, though. That may not, just because that's what works for me doesn't mean that's what works for you. And so my advice, find a day in the next 7 that you fully unplug and rest.
Yep. I love that. So Jen, thank you.
You're welcome, Jordan. I wasn't going to cry today because we talked yesterday so you could get my tears out. And still, I would like to say, I think as from all of your friends, we are really sorry about your mom. And we're so grateful for her because she gave us you, and the impact that she is making lives on through you. And so while I still have my tears and all these things, right? We love you, Jordan, and we're all here for you as a community. So
I appreciate that, Jen. So don't make me cry, okay? So the recording of this will be made available in our Facebook group, My Freed Life. So if you would like to go back and listen to this again, we will have it posted by the end of the day. If you're not a member of our community, please do so, because we have such amazing relationships with such amazing people like Miss Jen Davis. And Jen, we're all better for your example. So thank you for being who you are. And I can't wait to see you at the Chiefs Ravens game when the season opens up and we kick their ass. So
I'm so excited. Wait till you see my new outfit for the, oh, I sent you a picture. I've got Chiefs
yep,
overalls for anyone that's jealous of them. They're
I'm going to
great.
need a pair of those. So I appreciate you sending it to me. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back here same time, same place, Wellness Wednesday. Make it a great week.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.